Hi, I'm Kimberly Yee, Arizona State Treasurer, and I am so happy to be here visiting in Maricopa. I was born and raised in Arizona, so grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, and went to Greenway High School, Pepperdine University for my undergrad, majored in English and political science, and have a master's degree in public administration from Arizona State University. One of the things that I did right after college was start working for public policymakers. And so I had the privilege of working for 2 governors in California, and I specifically chose education-related policy. So early on, I worked on child care and development issues, and later serving for Governor Schwarzenegger, I was his deputy cabinet secretary and worked on education-related issues of that state. But I came back home, my home state, to work for former State Treasurer Dean Martin, and he was our state treasurer for 4 years back in 2007, 8, 9, and 10. And I served in his administration, and it was a time where the state was going through a lot of financial related issues, and the office was very helpful in trying to determine where our economic revenues were coming in and how they were being spent. So we were able to use the Treasurer's Office back then to warn the legislature and the executive back then that things were looking dim in the future, and from an economic forecast, they needed to start spending down what they were previously spending on because the revenues were not coming in. Back then, it was really the beginning of using the Treasurer's Office for economic purposes in helping policymakers in their roles.
At that time?
Yes, very much so. Well, they did have our information available for them. Did they listen? No, unfortunately they didn't. We asked them to spend, $150 million less than they were spending, and then they created a budget that fiscal year to spend more than $150 million. So, that's not the way we anticipated they should go, but we did our due diligence by providing the information for them to know where we were in our budget and where we were in the economy. Now, fast forward around that same time, my state senator, she was looking to retire. So it was a woman asking another woman to, run for office, and I wanted to see if that door would become open, and it did. And so I became a state House member first, and then served in the Arizona Senate for 3 terms, and District 20, which was Northwest Phoenix, parts of Glendale. And I served as the Senate Majority Leader in my last term. I was the second female to have that position since Sandra Day O'Connor served in it 44 years prior to that time. So it was a real privilege to meet with Sandra Day O'Connor, a former justice, when she came to the legislature, and I invited her as my guest, and we promoted civics education, which is a legacy that she wanted to leave following her time on the bench. Well, my mother was a former school teacher in the public school system in Phoenix for 38 years. And so it was easy for me to make that decision, because around the dinner table as a young girl, we talked about education and the importance of making sure that our kids have a high quality education no matter what zip code they lived in. And so I carried that in my public policy behind the scenes, working for elected officials. And then when I became elected, that really was a priority for me and has been. So I'll continue working on education related issues even out of the Treasurer's Office. So right off the bat, I promoted financial education in our schools, which is something that's very important. Back when I worked for State Treasurer Dean Martin 12 years ago, we were looking at our schools, and we unfortunately found that we aren't teaching our kids the basics, these life skills on how to manage their money. Finally, at the end of my term, we looked at how do we incentivize a high schooler to take classes that teach you these basic skills, because these other classes are much more inviting, like golf and art, and who would take a business class or something that would teach these things. So I created a little seal at the end of my time in the Senate that allows for a student who takes these courses to have a seal of proficiency for financial education. So that really would help them to take those, even if it's one semester, a class that would allow them to get that seal on a graduation diploma. But once I became state treasurer, it was important to do a little bit more. And really, we really want to teach students in high school those basic life skills to ensure that they understand how to manage, balance a budget, balance their checkbook, what it means to carry credit month to month on their credit card. And so we had a bill put before the legislature that has now become law that requires a student who is in their econ semester to be taught financial education within that time period. So they would have curriculum that would be embedded in that econ semester that teaches them these basic skills. So the task force will move forward to create more ideas. This was already done in my first 6 months, and it's now law. So this will be the first academic year that will be administered. Again, this is something that we have a long line of items that we want to continue to work on. So I created a task force of 16 members, 17 including myself. I chair the task force, first ever in the state, that brought together experts in this field, individuals who will represent not only our K through 12 system to advance educational options for financial education, but also other vulnerable communities like our senior citizens who are on fixed income budgets, our veterans, and those who have served in the military. We have a representative on their behalf. We have teachers, and we have individuals who represent vulnerable populations, for instance, single-parent homes, and those who are just struggling to find jobs. And we also wanted to be sure to hit a number of these groups who are dealing with issues in their finances, to provide them a toolbox, resources that are free. Well, in a good way, there was very little transition time because I already knew the office and how it works. At the very beginning, I wanted to create a new structure in terms of its our operational chart, organizational chart. I moved various divisions into areas that fit better in terms of operations and performance from our investment side. So as you know, we manage roughly $40 billion in the state's cash management of the budgets going in and out of agencies throughout the year. And we have roughly $17 billion in assets under management in our office. And this provides investments for local governments, local jurisdictions that would like our office optionally to invest their dollars. So it was important for me to look to see, well, what have other administrations done, whatever our performance has been in those areas, what can we do that could be improved? And one of the things that I wanted to improve was our local government investment pool. So again, these are optional choices that local governments can make. But if they see that our returns are doing great, which they are, and they want to invest those local dollars, then that means more for the local taxpayer, which means more money for infrastructure, education, transportation. And I want to provide that eye-to-eye conversation with our local leaders. So I have been going out on the road and talking to our mayors and council folks because they need to know, one, we're managing their funds, but we're doing a great job at it. And we have various portfolio options that they can continue to use or advance. And again, if we maximize every single dollar, that's really what matters. And that's what the people elected me to do. So I'm really looking at not only from the state level, but also for our local dollars as well. But if you were to look at our long-term investments over 10 years, over $1 billion, and you were to compare the National Association of Colleges and University Business Officials that ranks the biggest endowments across the country, we outperformed Yale and Stanford and Columbia and Harvard, all of the big universities. We ranked in the 95th percentile. And so it shows that our office has done very, very well in its investment performance on behalf of the taxpayers.